Art. There's nothing that beats physical art. For some reason, I've just gotten attached to the physical medium, okay? I know digital medium can really just have way more saturation and just be better to look at in general, but I can touch that, okay? I can go over and touch it. And I don't care what anyone tells me, there's nothing better than that. For some reason, I wanted to make this part of an even bigger video. I took the advice, however, of the many great artists before me and decided to cut the fat, okay? I like the board. I want to share the board. So instead of a highly researched and highly explorative video, this one I'm experimenting. I'm just gonna show you how I made that. And also, I think an important part of that is where my inspiration actually came from. The inspirations for this board was very near and dear to my heart, but I will show you and walk you through the process. So please join me. So here's how I started. I reused this deck from an older board that I made in university, which I was experimenting with. The idea of this board was a disco board, the sort of reflective, shiny Christmas wrap that I kind of glued on there. And I used this spray-on glue that got it pretty stuck on there. So I had to rip that off, scrape it off, and then use isopropyl alcohol to kind of get rid of the glue. I don't know if I really did it completely, but it was good enough. And then I had to sand the board to make sure that the paint has something to grip onto, which is always a painful process, especially doing indoors. It'd be nice to have a studio, but you work with what you got. There's definitely a ton of dust everywhere, and it'll stay in my carpet forever. Then I used white paint to create a base layer, and I wish I actually used a more neutral grayish color, since it would have let me do less layers, because it's like you just don't have to put as much paint on top of it. Then I transferred the design from what I created in Photoshop to my skateboard. I usually do this by just printing it off, putting a bunch of charcoal on the backside, taping it on, and then tracing it out, pushing the pencil in. And it's basically just DIY tracing paper. Ideally, the goal would be to have a projector, but that's getting pretty fancy. Instead, I bought a Cricut, which is a machine that cuts paper for you, and it just like cuts it very accurately. It's like a machine, it's like a laser cutter kind of, but it's a blade. So it can only cut paper and like thin material. And that'll definitely help with my next board. But I did the hard way with this one because I didn't have the Cricut at that point. And then finally, I could start painting. And just for your knowledge, it took about 20 hours to actually like design and bring it through like people and get it kind of done. And I'm rounding, but it doesn't matter. But it definitely did not have to take this long. This is, you know, I usually don't spend 100 hours on a board. And most of that work, if not like 90% of that work, is just me painting. But I made some really poor choices creating this. The worst choice I made was doing the splash first, because that made me like have to redo a lot of the elements, because I did everything by hand and I did not use the technology that I had available to me, which I should have just coughed up the money before and then got the better tools. It would have saved me a lot of time. Because the biggest challenge was color. One thing that I learned a lot about during this process was that the color on the screen is a lot more saturated than what's physically available. Your computer screen creates color with light. It's like an RGB model. It's like the tiny pixels as red, green, and blue. And while paint creates color by absorbing light with pigments, it's a CMYK based model. The range of colors a screen can produce, its gamut, is much wider and more vibrant than what you can actually mix with physical paint. Because it's an additive model. This is especially true for bright, luminous blues and greens. There's just no pigments out there for it. And this saturation issue, or chroma issue, means the same thing, caused me to basically have to use the image I created and looking at my computer as a color reference for the relationships between each color. And I just didn't know that at first, so I did the splash and I tried to recreate that beautiful, like luminous light blue, but I just it was impossible to reach with what I had. So I put more white into it, making it desaturated, and it blends in with the background, which is not what I was going for. So the solution I came up with was trying to create more distance between the chroma of the background and the foreground. So I reduced the chroma of the background and increased the chroma of the splash, but then that also forced me to lower its tone. So there's not a huge difference between the blues and the splash, but it was a compromise and it definitely had to happen. But, why go through this whole process if I have the image on the computer? It's it's just nothing in my opinion beats having physical art. It just needs to be there physically. It's so much nicer, and I think the colors on the board still give the same vibe anyways. But if I'm thinking now, if I perhaps lowered the chroma of the background even more, just adding more white to that background, I could have kept the splash how it was, thus saving like many hours of work. I didn't choose that route, and I felt pretty strong-willed for this project and, could spend a long time painting. I also did a lot of the elements in a weird order. If I had a projector, it would just be a lot easier. And even like using the Cricut, actually, it would be a lot easier because I did the splash first, which was a bad idea. That should have been last because you can just like use a brush stroke to place some blue on top of like a green. But if you put the blue first, you have to paint around the little dots, and that can get pretty intricate and annoying, as you can see what I'm doing. It is honestly a very hard way at which I went about it. But, I'm learning at least, it's only bad if you don't learn from it. And, right after this project, I was like, okay, I can't do that again. So I bought the Cricut for about half its retail price on Facebook Marketplace. Don't mean to flex, though. I wish I used the Cricut for this. It would have laid the paint more evenly as well with cleaner lines, because you can put down the vinyl and have it like stick on there and then just roll over it with a there's a term for it, but it's just like a rubber roller thing. But I do think there is an argument that like when you're painting with a brush and you put down the paint thick, you can see the brush strokes. I like that though. There's a nice vibe to it, a good quality. And you do end up with small imperfections, but it doesn't matter. So it depends what you want as well. Ultimately, I think the elements work well together. It has a very nice flow to it. A lot of movement in this design, which I find very interesting and stimulating to look at. Like whenever I walk into my room now, it's one of the first things I look at just because it's so vibrant. One thing an artist should think about, it's the eye's journeys on the piece. So for my board, as an example, my eyes usually start in the middle on the panda, and then I think I consciously choose then if I want to look to left or right. But I usually look to the right because I think that's kind of how I read. But typically I'm drawn to the middle first, where the panda is, where the most saturation, and that's also the center. I think in the West, though, our eyes usually start at the top left naturally and then go bottom right because we were used to reading that way. So for the design, I actually plan to make this video an aesthetics iceberg, which I'm still going to end up doing, but I had this amazing idea for layering each tier of the iceberg by the board I draw. So this is tier 1, and I just find that motif. I have like 10 different tiers, 10 different boards. This is a huge scope, and I think as long as I have the footage to do it, I'm still gonna do it. I'm just gonna make these each its own individual video and then reuse the board footage to create the iceberg, because I have a ton of research, and I've even voiceovered a lot of the research and what I think about each step of the tier and like each item in the tier. But I think that project is going to take like 1,000 hours to make, because this was 100 hours. And, if I can get better and faster, it could definitely take it down a lot. But yeah, this is going to be a fat tier list. But I had an amazing idea, but, strangely enough, when I finished, I looked down, I realized that this is just so very much like Xbox aesthetic. And I don't know, I just gravitated towards that aesthetic because one day I looked in my notes and I wrote, this is my favorite one. So I did that. I took that inspiration and I just kind of ran with it. And I used the panda as from actually the one of the Xbox character icons that you can choose for your online profile. And it just brings a lot of good memories. And so I put it in as the central subject. I mean, he just looks so cool and happy. The inspiration comes from Vector Bloom. And the Xbox 360 style was heavily influenced by Vector Bloom. The Vector Bloom aesthetic is comprised of a lot of flowing lines and motifs related to flowers, but it's obviously the rise of vector art, which is early 2000s. I think also it represents more of a broad concept of technological optimism. like I feel like recently technology is not looked positively upon, and for good reasons, of course. But I think it's also true that the internet is an amazing tool for creation. I mean, look what you're watching right now. And I don't know if cynicism is very sustainable. Obviously, not that cynicism is always a choice, but I think approaching this skateboard with optimism was really very fun for me. Think it was also like reliving my childhood a bit. I had recently actually jailbroken my PS3 and started downloading all of like older games and replaying like Dead Space or Dead Rising. And they're just so fun. And Skate 3, oh, so fun. Like looking at this board just makes me happy. Like it has just such a positive vibe. Also, like having a huge project like this in the background is so good for me because I get home from my 9 to 5 and I don't have to think about what I need to do. I just kind of turn my brain off and just draw. It's really nice. But it is funny, even though I was a PlayStation kid, the Xbox 360 is my favorite console because of those times in Evan's family's basement, which was like basically my second home. FIFA tournaments that I lost immediately, both in the main and loser brackets. But, nevertheless, the Xbox inspires a lot of good memories for me. So I really wanted to bring it back to life, I felt like. Bringing it back to my present. One of the best things I liked about playing Xbox was it was just different. I had a PlayStation, so Xbox was just so much different and like it had different games. It was very stimulating. Nowadays, I think there's a lot of games that kind of cross over, but I mean, there still are exclusives, but I feel like, I don't know, there's not many good games anymore for the consoles. Unless you're talking about Nintendo. Nintendo's killing it. Halo was so fun, and the game store had lots of indie games too. And it also had motion capture. Playing Just Dance was so fun, especially at like a birthday party when you just got a bunch of kids wigging out too much sugar and just dancing up a storm. And I think the first time I played Dead Rising was on Evan's Xbox, and I think it was the demo. And I remember downloading it while he was asleep and just playing the demo over and over because I couldn't pay for it on his Xbox because I didn't have a credit card or anything. But I remember downloading it while he was sleeping so I could play it. I mean, that's just how much time we spent together. Those times at his basement were some of the best times of my life. And the Xbox didn't have Uncharted, so take that. The craziest feeling is that a part of me is grateful I never had to bear watching us slip further away from each other as we got older. And it's not like it would be anyone's fault. It's just more busy and further away from each other. And a friendship like that is just so rare. So I'm just happy to have experienced it. So if you have friends out there, hold them close. Like there's no reason to just be grateful for it in the moment. Because, getting older, I don't think I'll ever have a friendship that close again, aside from the person I choose to spend my life with, my partner. But there's definitely something about being a kid that just makes you better at making friends. Perhaps it's the innate vulnerability of being a child in a new setting, away from your family for the first time and surrounded by strangers. In any case, I'm just happy that it happened. That maybe that's the strategy for making new friends is like you have to put yourself in these situations that are very vulnerable. And maybe that's why it's really hard to make new friends in adulthood because you are innately less vulnerable. So after I finish painting it, I go back and I add the finishing touches, especially sanding the edges. I usually would have taped that off at the start, but I just didn't. I don't know why. I just made so many mistakes with this board. But there's also a backside, which is like a grip tape design that I did for the previous board. I'm going to go ahead and scrape all that off. I use similar techniques to the backside, so all the glue has to go as well. And I really should have done this before I started painting, but here I am. And I think it turned out really well. I really like this design. It's like the idea is amazing for me. It's personal. And but yeah, for my first massive project, this is my first like 100-hour YouTube video. I am dedicating this to Evan and his family for being there for me. I love you guys. Please like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm if you made it this far. I know you liked the video. Come on. Or you're one of my family members watching this because I force all of you guys to do it. So thanks for watching.